That feeling you get when you get too important at work and all of a sudden your bosses are making you do more than you had intended to do at your job? Well, that happened to Pedri in the footballing world, both for Barcelona and the Spanish national team. And it ended up with Pedri looking like this. Pedri's a player who realistically is one of the best young midfielders in the world. In a footballing landscape where we're currently spoiled with promising talents, Pedri's definitely a player that is in and around the upper echelon of that crop of players. A great dictator of play, who Barcelona have relied on to be that midfield outlet that is able to progress the ball forward effectively and also control matches. Since his arrival to the big stage, Pedri is a player who has garnered a ton of hype behind his name and profile. A key figure in Barcelona's midfield, many football fans were to believe that Pedri is a player who in the long run would become a name that we throw up there with the greats. This is also reflected in his transfer valuation, which since he really started getting going for Barcelona, has steadily increased. I think it's also very important to note that when Pedri signed his new contract with Barcelona, it included a €1 billion release clause, which, as ridiculous as that sounds, shows you how much the club really values the player. But for as much hype as was built around Pedri, am I the only one that feels like the hype train for Pedri just kind of stopped out of nowhere? Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that his quality has dropped off or that he doesn't deserve any praise, but rather it just feels like the amount of attention and hype that Pedri receives has decreased significantly from a few years ago. If I would ask you before you clicked on this video who the best under 21 midfielders in world football are, there's a chance you might have forgotten to list Pedri, and it could be due to a variety of reasons. But I believe it comes down to one major aspect of his career that has been a byproduct of how good he is, and it's essentially just been building up through his short career so far. And real quick boys, if you enjoyed the video and enjoying the content on the channel, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. We're posting weekly football videos, so make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss an upload. And if you're not new to the channel boys, welcome back. I'm glad to have you around for another video. But with that being said boys, let's get into how Pedri built this hype train behind him and why it feels like it kind of just came to a stop. So I do think it's important we preface his decrease in hype by talking about how he got there in the first place. Pedri would first grab headlines in his senior debut for Las Palmas in La Segunda División de España at just age 16. He would go on to register 4 goals and 7 assists across 37 games in all competitions. While these aren't the most insane numbers, you have to remember this is a 16-year-old going up against grown-ass men. So from the midfielder position, 4 goals, 7 assists at 16 is pretty good. Following this impressive campaign, Barcelona would swoop up Pedri for just about €5 million, securing themselves a proper young talent for the future. It wouldn't be too long until Pedri would make his debut, as he would feature in a 20-minute cameo in a 4-0 win over Villarreal. From here on out, the then 17-year-old would continue to come off the bench in a handful of matches until eventually becoming a mainstay in the midfield. He quickly became a real-life version of the youngest boss man you've ever seen. First season with Barcelona, he would go on to register 4 goals and 6 assists across 56 appearances. I want you to remember that number for later, 56 appearances at the age of 17 or 18. So keep in mind also that for Pedri's profile, his only real competition in this Barcelona team were the likes of Coutinho, Sergio Roberto, Pjanic, and Ricky Puig. But realistically, Pedri was better than. Busquets and the Young were also at the club at that point in time, but I felt like they served different roles that didn't necessarily impede on Pedri and his ability and what he's able to offer on the football pitch. And it was still clear that Pedri was somewhat of a raw player to an extent, but there was no denying that he really used his first season at Barcelona to thrust himself into the limelight. Pedri had already begun to dictate games for Barca and he was only just getting started. What also massively helped Pedri to get a lot of game time and really put himself out there was the fact that Barcelona was not going to go out there and purchase some incredible midfield talent that would take the light away from Pedri. Not because they didn't want to, but because they simply couldn't. And realistically, with Pedri's first season at Barca, this is where the hype train really began. Think about it. Good first season with the club, secured first piece of silverware with Barcelona as they won the Copa del Rey, and also managed 50 plus appearances for Barcelona at just the age of 18. After the season would be when Barcelona handed Pedri his brand new contract to secure him until 2026 with that aforementioned €1 billion release clause. At this point, his transfer market valuation had also jumped from €30 million to €80 million, so essentially just about 3 times the transfer value. But the thing is, at the end of the season, you could argue that this is really when things started to take a turn for the worse for Pedri. And it wasn't necessarily due to a lack of playing time or anything. If anything, it was the exact opposite. So usually after a season where a player might go through 52 grueling games in a season, they'll take the summer to rest up before preseason. This allows their bodies to recover and not get overworked, something that at any age is a vital part of physical activity and football specifically. I'm 25, I'm just a bum, and when I play a Sunday league game, I need a week to recover. So you can imagine playing high intensity every single week, maybe 2 times a week, 52 times over a year. You're gonna need some time to recover. But yet for Pedri, he would go into not 1, but 2 international tournaments for Spain that summer. First it was the Euros, Euros, which were being played in 2021 due to the 2020, life event. In this tournament, Pedri would proceed to play an additional 6 games, which would add up to 629 minutes of football in just about 3 weeks. Pedri would have a decent individual tournament, as we saw more of the same from him from a performance standpoint, so one would figure that now he would take the time to rest before starting his next season with Barcelona. Well, as I said earlier, Pedri went straight into another competition. So after the Euros, Pedri would then travel to Japan to take part in the Olympics. So not only was he going straight into his 3rd or 4th tournament at this point in the last year of football, he was also traveling into another time zone now, which wasn't going to do him any favors. So with him at the Olympics, this competition would be the birthplace of that now infamous photo of Pedri where he looks like he hadn't had any food in years. And at this point, you began to see the narrative change around Pedri. More or less, it went from, wow, look at this amazing wonder kid, he's going to have an immaculate career, to this kid is going to burn out next season if he doesn't get a break now. And it really began to show how maybe there was an over-reliance on Pedri, both from Barcelona and the Spanish national team, especially considering how young he was. And really this season where he burst onto the scene with Barcelona and Spain would really lead to Pedri's weird status in football. So after all this, after playing a straight season of club football and 2 international tournaments, Pedri really wouldn't get a break to kick off the 21-22 season, as he would feature in the first 2 matches of the season. However, this is where we began to see Pedri's body failing him. He would suffer a hamstring injury that would see him miss about 5 to 6 months of action, and during this spell on the sideline, Pedri would win the UEFA Golden Boy Award, which did really help him stay relevant to this point in time, because even though he won the award, fans still had to wait to see him on a pitch. And once he did return, he would immediately go back into the side, and to his credit, he would impress as we saw he still had the same quality as before he got hurt. He would register a few goals and assists, and his impressive performances at his still incredibly young age made it feel like one injury wouldn't be enough to stop him straight in his tracks. And then he would injure his hamstring again, meaning he would go on to miss the rest of the season, clearly showing there was a problem brewing here. But you know what? You give Pedri the benefit of the doubt, as there's always next season for him to kick off. If anything, this time on the sideline, give him a proper chance to really rest before the next season. Since there was no international tournaments for Pedri to be taken advantage of this time around, he would actually be able to take this summer to rest up. So to kick off the 22-23 season, things look promising for Pedri and Barca. He would once again be a mainstay in the midfield, where he would allow the club to control matches, even featuring a 21-game run in La Liga, where Barca only lost 1 match. In this run, Pedri would even go on to score 6 goals from the center mid position. Again, keep in mind this guy was just about 19 at this point and was making things tick for Barca. But of course, things would come crushing down, as the amount of game time Pedri was getting would ultimately catch up to him again. He was racking up 90-minute performances like nothing, again being overly relied on in this Barca setup. A testament to how good he is, but ultimately he was getting too much game time. Keep in mind too that the league paused this year and players then had to fly to Qatar to participate in even more matches at the World Cup. Ultimately, a muscle and hamstring injury would see Pedri miss the majority of the last half of the season, having missed what felt like the entire 21-22 season and now half of the 22-23 campaign. Pedri's name began to feel like it was fading from the important conversations that his name should belong in, especially with the emergence of names like Bellingham, Wirtz, Musiala, and heck, even Lamine Yamal, his own teammate. Pedri unfortunately had the burden of his body essentially giving up on him. And it wouldn't get much better, as in the 23-24 season, Pedri would suffer another hamstring injury after just 2 La Liga matches. And from a hype standpoint, it really felt like this was it for the young Spaniard. Given that Bellingham, who I just mentioned, had just moved to La Liga, and not just to La Liga, but Real Madrid specifically, it felt like he pretty much came and snatched Pedri's chain when it came to that young midfield conversation. And if anything, Pedri would once again have a very stop-start season, as he would suffer a handful of injuries throughout this campaign. Without being on the pitch, it's been hard for fans to keep this guy in these important conversations that he should be in. It's been 87 games total that Pedri has missed through injury, and a lot of it comes down to the over-reliance to use him not only in the Barcelona setup, but also in the Spanish national team. So it's not all doom and gloom for Pedri. At the end of the day, he's still 21 years old. He still has an incredibly large amount of time to get back into these conversations. And if anything, the season he's been having so far with Barcelona has been incredible. We saw it today with his performance against Bayern Munich, where he was able to perform at a high level, not only slightly deeper in the midfield, but also in a slightly more advanced position once Frankie de Jong came into the pitch. It's just the main question of, is he going to stay fit? In my opinion, with so many young players coming through Barcelona, it is a very important season, especially having to go up against his very crazy Real Madrid side. But when given the opportunity, they need to rest Pedri. They need to let his body really recover because of how much he's already been through. The sky's really the limit with Pedri. Like I said, we're seeing this season, his performances are still there. He's still up to par. But if he suffers another injury this season that sees him miss pretty much a large chunk of the campaign, so then we don't see him until next season, his name's just gonna keep dying out and dying out. So hopefully he can stay fit, that way his name gets the respect that it really deserves.